welcome to In the News for June 18, 2021. I am Brett Burney from AppsandLaw.com.
Hello, Brett. This is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD.
Jeff, we might have to cut this recording a little short today. I've got some Apple TV shows that I've got to catch up on and finish binge watching before apparently my free trial goes out in a few weeks here. You did a good job covering some of this today.
Yeah. We've all had free Apple TV Plus for a very long time, much longer than any of it expected. But I got to tell you, I've been surprised at how good the shows are. When the service started, there was nothing. There was no back catalog. I mean, it was the opposite of a Netflix type situation. Right. And yet Apple has released, I know I've heard people say that their goal is to sort of be like HBO and that it's, good quality stuff. Not a lot of on Netflix. You can find a lot of you can find some good shows too. But you can find a lot of silly shows that are just whatever. And although there's one or two of those in Apple TV Plus, there's a whole lot of quality shows on there. Really good stuff.
Can we just quickly, because I hear this from a lot of folks, Jeff, can we differentiate and let people understand there's Apple TV, right, which is the actual hardware. That's the little like 4-inch by 4-inch little box that you buy and you can plug into your TV. And then this is Apple TV Plus that we're talking about, which is a subscription service similar to something like Netflix or Disney Plus now or some of these others or something like that. I find that people are still a little confused, and I think some of that is on Apple's shoulders for
it's even
basically
more confusing than that. Yeah, because it's not just the hardware and the streaming service, but that app that's on your iPad and your Mac is called TV, and that TV app is both used for Apple TV Plus, but then is also used for like other things too, like your home videos and stuff like that. Right. It's all they've reused the same name too many times.
I find myself even confused, Jeff, on the Apple TV itself, right? Because I turn on my Apple TV, I've got Netflix, Amazon Prime, the HBO Max, and then there's Apple TV. And when I go in there, I'm like, wait a minute, those are shows from Netflix, right, that I was watching or other places. I mean, I really think Apple needs to do a little bit of a better job in kind of, maybe differentiating. Nonetheless, there are some fantastic shows that they have been putting out on Apple TV Plus.
Yeah, there have been. I mean, the one that's probably getting the most acclaim, I feel like almost to the surprise of Apple, has been Ted Lasso, which, could not have come at a better time last year.
Absolutely.
So many of us, me included, said, I don't know that I really want to watch a show about soccer. I'm not that big of a soccer fan, even though my daughter
with like an American football coach, right? It's like it can't work.
Little did I know that would be such a funny and such a heartwarming and uplifting show. And although there are certainly drama and characters in there that have unfortunate situations, but it's just hilarious. And it even has a little bit of a hint of, The Office, the TV show. Yeah. I remember when The Office was on TV, a number of the actors were also writers for the show. And the same is true here. The Coach Beard character, Brendan Hunn, is one of the writers, and of course, Jason Sudeikis. And it's just such a funny show. I laugh every time I watch it. I loved it. I told my wife she had to watch it. She said no. And then once she decided to appease me, then she couldn't. We binged it too, and both of us can't wait for the second season. So that's one of them that I've really enjoyed.
I did not jump into the Ted Lasso pool for a long time, Jeff, and my wife and I, just like everyone else, I'm sure, is like, hey, what show are we going to watch next? And I'm like, I keep hearing people, they just will not shut up about Ted Lasso. And so we watched it, and Jeff, similar to your experience, I remember after like the first or second episode, my wife just looked at me and was like, that's just a happy show. Like, I'm just happy to watch that show. And sure enough, we watched and finished the whole series. And now I think it's next month, right? July 23rd, you put it on here. The next season starts on there.
Yeah. Let me recommend a couple more for you or for others who are, trying to watch before the free trial ends, or maybe they'll spend that $5 for the first couple of months. For All Mankind is a fabulous show. It's this alternative reality where what if Russia landed on the moon first before America? And so you have this space race between America and Russia throughout the 1960s and 1970s and then continuing on. So the first season takes place in the late 60s and 70s. So if you enjoy things like, Mad Men or shows that are, good period pieces, it's got that to it. But then it's very exciting and very good. Season 2, which was, I guess, earlier this year, takes place in 1983, which I personally enjoyed because I grew up in the 1980s, and so it brought back memories. And yet it's this alternative world where things are a little different because, when a couple things change and then years later even more changes and years later even more changes. And then I think season 3, when it comes out maybe next year, is going to be in the 1990s. So it sort of takes, every season is, 10, 15 years later, but it is a really, really good show. I loved it. And my son, who's really into space, I started watching it again with him just like a week or two ago, and we're binging through it, and I love it again. It's great.
I got to do that. I keep hearing you talk about it, and I first when I saw it, I thought, well, that's just like a little documentary about the space race or something. But no, it sounds like it's much more exciting than that, and I'm great. I can't wait now. Okay, so just quickly, the reason that we're talking about this, not because we wanted to make sure people weren't so confused, but the way that Apple had rolled this out, if you got, I think it was any kind of an Apple hardware, right? I think I had bought an iPhone, the last couple of years, but even if you got, I think, an iPad or a Mac,
substantial hardware, not like AirPods, but like any big
exactly.
hardware,
Exactly. You basically, Apple gave you a free trial to the Apple TV Plus. So basically everybody had it if you had bought a phone or an iPad in the last couple of years. But all good things must come to an end, right? So Apple is getting ready to cut you off unless you want to subscribe to it. Or Jeff, you're good about helping people understand there's a subscription just to the TV, but you can also get an Apple One subscription, which includes a lot of other stuff as well.
Yeah, and there's even different tiers of the Apple One subscription depending upon what you have in it. I've got the Premier tier, which I think is $30 a month, but it includes everything. It includes, Apple TV Plus, the Apple News, the Apple Fitness Plus, the extra iCloud space. I mean, there you go. You got them on the screen right now. All sorts of different things. And it ends up being cheaper for me to do it this way because I had enough of them individually. The Apple Arcade is in there. And, and it's nice just having one payment. There's a lot of convenience of having one thing. So if you're in the Apple ecosystem, it's a pretty good deal.
So if you got the free subscription like I do, you got to finish watching everything by July or sign up for one of these. The Apple One subscription does look really, really good, and I'm excited about that.
Yeah. So
another thing that you talked about, which the more I watched this, I just got so interested in it, and we've talked about the Apple Watch many, many times already, and we're not going to be done talking about the Apple Watch. I mean, even watching this little video that you had here, let's see, this is Rene Ritchie, who used to be at imore.com, and he's gone out on his own and has a YouTube channel, which is just absolutely fantastic. But he had this interview with Kevin Lynch here on the screen, who we have, if you recognize him, we've seen him on the stage at Apple events because he talks about he is the VP in charge of the Apple Watch. And then another lady from marketing, Deidre, I think her name is.
Yeah.
And
Caldbeck.
We recognize her from the paddleboard. She'll always be known as the paddleboard lady because she was on a paddleboard making a phone call on her phone, right?
That was back in fall of 2017 when Apple came out with the Apple Watch Series 3, which was the first Apple Watch to have cellular. And to show that it worked, they put her in the middle of a lake on a paddleboard. And the idea is, live on air, she was called and she could respond to it. And although that was a silly, it was obviously a stunt, but it actually turned out to be more realistic than you might think. Not because I'm on a paddleboard that often, but that's actually when I have found cellular most useful on my Apple Watch. Is usually my iPhone's very close to me, but every once in a while I'll be off somewhere. Maybe I'm doing a run, down, in the city, or going through the park, or maybe, somewhere. I might just even be in the back of my backyard in my garage, and my phone is still inside, and my dad calls me, and I could see it in my watch who's calling me, and I'll just talk to him, and we have our little quick conversation. And so for those quick little, someone's trying to reach me, all I have is my iPhone, all I have is my watch. That's when I actually find cellular most useful. So.
Absolutely. And even just jumping on top of that too, one of the things that Rene Ritchie talks about here is most of us all do have our iPhone with us, or maybe a Mac or something, that we're close. But it's just the fact that I think he said it in here, that it's for brief, like the Apple Watch is for brief, frequent, but really critical, important things. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that Kevin Lynch talks about in here is replying to messages. Many times, like we were out in the yard digging a ditch in the yard yesterday, literally. But, we all had my wife and I had our watches on. And so if somebody were texting us, we were waiting on a couple of phone calls or so, we didn't have to stop what we were doing and go find our phone. We were able just to go up and bring up and tap a reply. And one of the things Kevin talks about on here is that instead of having to go in and scribble or try to, dictate the actual message, they literally put a series of common replies that most people would give to a message so that you don't have to take that long. In fact, that's where this little quote comes. It has to work in 2 seconds. I was fascinated by that. Like the studies that they do to try to get this little computer on your wrist to do things as quick as absolutely possible.
Yeah, a good example of that is it'll parse your messages. So like if someone sends you a text message to say, for example, what do you want to do for dinner tonight, Italian or Chinese? The Apple Watch will see the or between Italian and Chinese.
Right.
And if you look at your watch, the first option will be Italian and the second option will be Chinese. So you could lift your wrist, see the message, and then just tap the first 2 buttons to make a choice. And as Kevin Lynch said, and you may have just said this, that they try to make it that within 2 seconds, you can get in and out and do what you want to do. And that is brilliant. And in fact, the app, although they didn't talk about this in this excellent video, which is worth watching, when you think of it, Apple sort of, the entire Apple ecosystem, at the very top, you have the Mac, the computer, which is the workhorse. It can do all the powerful things. And then you've got the iPad, which doesn't quite do everything that the computer does, although it does some additional things with the Apple Pencil, but it's just enough. Often your iPad is all that you need. And then you've got your iPhone, which of course does even less, but for things like reading emails and responding to them in text messages, that may be all that you need.
It's right there.
And you've got the Apple Watch, which is for those quick things that just take a few seconds. And if you want to go even lower, you could even argue like, AirPods, that because of the Hey Siri function, you can quickly get information. So it's this full spectrum from the most powerful everything you would want to do with your electronics, all the way down to the quickest of interactions. Apple has you covered.
That the last thing quickly that caught my ear on this was just how much they talked about the health benefits, the focus that Apple continues to put on utilizing these tools, so that I think the way Deidre put it there was people can monitor their own health, which again, it seemed like I haven't put enough focus on that, but the more and more that I use that, the next generation of the Watch OS is going to have fall detection. And Kevin was talking about they had like 100,000 people in this study, right? And it had to take a long time because they wanted to monitor like real actual falls, not people, attempting to fall. And it just kind of illuminated for me how much time they put into this and all the brainstorming that goes into this. And then what you and I talked about a few weeks ago, they were talking about like the assistive, what do they call it? Assistive touch, where you can like clench your fist and have something happen on the watch. And just how amazing that is. Like he was even talking about how they studied how much energy would go into like tapping your fingers versus clenching your wrist versus moving it back and forth. Just incredible that this is just going to continue to become an important device in our everyday lives.
I've always had the sense that when the Apple Watch came out, Apple wasn't exactly sure of how it would really be used. And so they just put up a bunch of possible things out there. And over time, they quickly realized that there's 2 things. There's the notifications and responses, that 2-second thing we just talked about. But then there's also the health benefits, because it is, Apple CEO Tim Cook has called the Apple Watch the most personal of Apple devices because it's literally attached to your body. And there's so many interesting things you can do when you have something attached to someone's body, like monitoring their heartbeat and a bunch of other things and fall detection. And I feel like over time, Apple is learning more and more about what you can do with this. Plus the devices themselves get more sophisticated with more sensors. And it's fun to see how far the Apple Watch has come since it was first introduced. And then when you think, 5 years from now, it's going to be even more useful. I love the Apple Watch far more than I ever realized that I would.
Agree, totally agree. And I thought it was just going to be kind of a one-off, kind of a fancy thing, but yeah, it is becoming more integrated. Anyway, this video, like you said, is really good. And what's been fascinating to me, as you can see from what we've been talking about, there have been other videos where we've seen the evolution of the iPhone, how it came to market, and the iPad. And now we're kind of getting some of the history on this Apple Watch, including Kevin Lynch here. He was even talking about when Rene asked him, when was the first time you knew about the Apple Watch? He's like, my first day at Apple. They didn't even tell me I could go to orientation. He's like, would you know enough about Apple? We need to get to work on this. So Kevin just like pushing for it.
He's an interesting guy because, before Apple, he worked at Adobe and he was in charge of Flash, which Apple was like so against Flash for the right reasons, because Flash was. And so when Apple first hired this guy who was responsible for Flash on web
what's
browsers,
he going to do?
Like, seriously? And yet I tell you, from all appearances, he has knocked it out of the park with the Apple Watch. So kudos to him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Another couple of stories that you linked to, which of course, I don't know if we can ever do one of these sessions, Jeff, without talking about the iPad as well, just because it's become such an important tool in both of our lives. I know this. This was a really interesting article on TechCrunch, where they had a couple of vice presidents from Apple where they were being interviewed about how they're integrating some of the multitasking components into the iPad. Now, you and I have talked about a lot of this already, but there were some really interesting comments I thought that came out of this. For example, one that I guess I kind of knew, but I hadn't thought about it too much, was that the iPad basically has become the only successful tablet device on the market. Now, I know there's others, but when it comes to the nitty gritty of it, like this is it, which means that Apple then pretty much has a unique opportunity to create some of these paradigms. Like, how are we going to interact with tablet devices? And I really thought that was really nifty that they kind of pointed that out here in the article.
Agreed. Another thing that was interesting in the article that the Apple executives pointed out to the author was the multitasking, although it's been around for a number of years, and you and I talked about this a few episodes ago, it has really been a power user feature.
Yes.
It wasn't immediately intuitive how to do it, and sometimes people just get confused when they trigger it by accident, and so it was almost a negative feature. And Apple has realized that. They've realized that we need to make it more understandable. You know, you've got it highlighted right there that they want to make it more have more mass appeal by making it more understandable. And I'm hoping that this new interface does it. But I love that was their goal, because that is exactly the right place to be focusing on this. If you're going to have it, make it so that everybody can understand it, much like on a computer. Pretty much anybody can understand the idea of multiple windows on a computer. You need to do that to the iPad too. And I hope that they've done it.
It made me think of, I've heard stories about how Microsoft Word several years ago interviewed, hundreds of thousands of users. Hey, what features would you like to see in Microsoft Word? And at like 8 out of 10 of those features that people said were already in Microsoft Word.
I heard that report. That's so funny.
Yeah. But it makes sense. And that's one of the reasons they went to the ribbon. So obviously this is quite a while ago, because they were trying to make sure that people could find those features so much easier. And that made me think about that as I was reading this story about these vice presidents from Apple. And I think that they are trying to just kind of uncover some of these features that are already there, so that it's easier to access for a lot of folks, just like you were saying.
Yeah, good analogy.
Including, one of the other things I thought was really neat is they want to make the iPad completely navigable by keyboard shortcuts, or by using the keyboard. And because I do that all the time. I know some people don't like to do keyboard shortcuts. I'm a big keyboard shortcut user, instead of always taking off and using the trackpad or the mouse. And we've had keyboards available for the iPad now. The fact that they're doubling down on that is pretty nifty. I was amazed at that.
Yeah, there was a good article that I linked to by Jason Snell of Six Colors in today's post on iPhone JD, where he talks about how there's so many more keyboard shortcuts that you can do in iPad OS 15.
Yeah.
And many of them actually there's a new key. We talked before about how Apple uses the word TV to mean a bunch of different things. Let me give you another example. You have the Apple Magic Keyboard, which is a standalone keyboard that comes with an iMac. And then you have the Apple Magic Keyboard for iPad, which is the one that has a case built in that you put the iPad in. And everybody calls them both the Magic Keyboard, and they're completely different things. But the Magic Keyboard for iPad, the new one actually in the bottom left corner, where there sometimes would be a function, an FN key, on other keyboards. There's now a picture of a globe there. And in this article that you're showing off, Jason Snell shows how with the globe, that's now a new modifier. So like the globe H will always go to the home screen, no matter what app that you're in. The globe A will always show the dock, no matter where you are. I hope and I expect that for those of us that have other keyboards, like the Apple Magic Keyboard original version, that the function key will do the exact same thing as the globe. But I love that it's making it more useful, because I don't want to use a keyboard with my iPad all the time. I don't want to use an Apple Pencil with my iPad all the time. But when I am using them, I want them to be powerful. And it looks like they really are going to be starting this fall.
My only concern, and I think Jason addresses this here, is like now you've got command, you got control, you got alt option, and now you got globe, right? There's going to be so many, and people are going to get a little confused. I find most people kind of find a comfort, a rut that they're comfortable with, and they kind of stay there using that. But again, maybe this is that differentiator again between just normal users and some of the pro users. But if you're willing to take a few minutes to invest the time to learn it, it's going to be even more powerful than before.
Yeah, you and maybe you just find the one or two that you use all the time. You know that when you're typing on Microsoft Word on your computer, Command B or Control B will do bold. Maybe you've learned that.
Right.
You just learn the ones that you use frequently, or you learn Control I as italics. And likewise with the iPad, you'll just learn the ones you become comfortable with, and the rest of them will be there for discovery, and you may learn them more over time.
As if to double down on this idea, Jeff, I love this little video you linked to from Apple. Your next computer is not a computer, which is you gotta go watch it. I'll have a link obviously, because it's based on what I'm not the best on my Disney princesses anymore. My daughter's out of that, but it's from The Little Mermaid. Like Part of Your World, I think is the name of the song. Yeah, of course it's brilliant because Apple did it. It's just wonderful.
I was listening to it last night, and my daughter walked in and she said, "Dad, why are you watching The Little Mermaid?" I'm like, "It's not The Little Mermaid. It's the video here.
Right. It's Apple. Don't worry.
It's a song parody, but it's a cute video. Don't spoil it any more than that. Go watch it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, to me, it's just fascinating that this is a video from Apple, and they literally, as you put it out here, your next computer is not a computer. Because when the iPad was first introduced, Jeff, I've said this several times, it was not introduced as a computer. It wasn't introduced as a replacement for your laptop, for the Mac laptop. It was a tablet. And now I'm starting to see Apple kind of shift this message now, as I think rightly as it should be, to where no, this can replace your computer. And we're getting closer to that, even with iOS 15.
Mm-hmm. And even if it doesn't replace your computer, because I said this a million times, sometimes attorneys will ask me, can you use an iPad? Do I even need a computer as an attorney?
Right.
I think you do need a computer as an attorney.
Yes,
but the thing is, many of the things that you would use a computer for, the iPad is just easier to work with. So yes, you're going to have a computer too. But as a secondary device, the iPad, is often more than you need, and it's so much lighter and smaller and everything else.
Right.
And I still see it that way. I mean, yeah, you're right. I see that the tagline is your next computer, but maybe the idea is if you already had a desktop and you were going to get a laptop, maybe instead the iPad is all that you need.
Right. Very nice. Very nice. Okay, Jeff, it's time for In the Know. Okay.
Woo-hoo.
My tip is, I think I'm a little late to the game on this one, but it's so great that I got to share it with this. So I just recently picked up a pair of AirPods Pro. So I've been using AirPods for a long time, but good. I know. So I found a good price on it. I picked it up. I've been hearing about this forever. And the first time I put them in, I know so many people have been talking about noise cancellation for so long, and I've never spent the time to invest in it. I'm like, okay, that's nice, but I want to hear what's going on around me. When the first time I put these in my ears and I went from transparency to noise cancellation, it was like a new world for me, Jeff. It just amazing. Even the same thing, I went down and had my wife test them out as well. It is just an incredible experience. Especially like I'm using it now, or when I'm sitting in my office, especially these days when I'm a home office, and I hear the kids downstairs or the dog or something else, I turn on the noise cancellation. I've got music in, and it just shuts it all off. Now, I wouldn't use this all the time, but when I go jogging, for example, I use the transparency mode because there's little microphones in these AirPods Pro that will listen to the environment around you, and it will let some of that environment bleed in. So if a car is coming up behind me or if a dog's barking, I can still hear it. And I love this approach and the fact that I can even do it just by squeezing an AirPod, and it switches from noise cancellation to transparency. And I'm just in love. I cannot believe it took me this long. It's a little bit of an investment, but today, in fact, I'll even link to it. Amazon keeps going out of stock on these, I think. But they have it for under $200.
Oh wow!
So
great price.
I know it's usually $250, right? Which is what Apple charges. But I think as part of the Pro or the Prime days or something, they've got it for just under $200. worth every penny. In fact, if you don't believe me, everybody looks at the Amazon ratings. Look at this, 206,000 ratings, and it's completely 5 stars. Yeah. That's just amazing. So I know this is old news for you and a lot of other folks, but I am just in love with these things. I leave them in all the time on most.
Yeah. And just to underscore that, to make sure it's clear, people think, oh, the AirPods Pro is the one you get for the noise cancellation. That's true. But it's just as true that it's the one that you get for the opposite of noise cancellation.
Yes.
Because that transparency mode, because it allows the outside world, you can hear the outside world and you can hear your music or your podcast or whatever. Right. It's actually easier to hear the outside world with AirPods Pro than it is with other headphones. So it can keep
absolutely
you either more, if I'm doing dishes and I don't want to listen to the rushing water, I'm going to put on the noise cancellation.
Yeah.
But if I'm just, sitting in the study listening to something, but I still want to hear if my wife or my kids yell out for me, then you put on the opposite, the transparency mode. And the rest of the world doesn't hear my music, but I can still hear the rest of the world. It's fascinating that it's got two, completely opposite modes that both work really well.
They do work well. And by the way, just quickly, if you're in the market for a new iPad or a new Mac, every year Apple does this, right? And their education discount, they usually throw in like a gift card or something like that. Well, today, if you get a Mac or an iPad, they'll throw in AirPods, but I believe if you want to pay something like $90 as an upgrade, you can get the AirPods Pro. You'll have to ask at your local Apple store, but I just wanted to let people know that that's something that is pretty interesting there.
That's a great pick, and I'm so glad that you have those. You're going to love them. They're great.
I like I said, I leave them in all the time because if I'm listening to music, I put them on noise cancellation. If I need to know what's going on, I just put transparency on and I can listen to the world around me. Okay, good. All right, your pick, Jeff.
My pick of the week is that I was wrong, and I'm apologize for it. 2 episodes ago, on episode number 4, you and I were talking about USB hubs, and I mentioned how much I love this little hyperdrive thing, the hyperdrive 6-in-1.
Yes, you did.
And I lamented the fact that with my new iPad Pro, it no longer fits. But as you can now see, I'm holding it up to the camera. Woo-hoo! It's on right now, because what I didn't realize is that, all I really needed was a slightly larger clip. And little did I know, I just learned it yesterday, that larger clip actually came with it. I've had that larger clip for 2 years, because they originally gave you something that if you had a screen protector on your iPad Pro, they give you a little bit thicker version, and that one works great. And so let me just say, if you have an iPad Pro that has the flat edge on it, the iPad Pro Series 3, 4, or 5th generation, the 3rd generation, 4th generation, or 5th generation, I love this little device because it connects flat against the edge of the iPad Pro, so it does not get in the way. It's not hanging off the edge with a cord, and yet it gives you every little port that you would want. It gives you the USB. It gives you the 2 different types of cards. It gives you USB-C. It gives you a headphone port. It gives you HDMI. I use it for presentations when I go out and hook up to a monitor and I'm presenting to people in a CLE or something like that. The picture you're showing right now shows it all. For thumb drives, it's great. So I absolutely love it. If you have one of these models of iPad Pro, including the newest one, this is a great purchase. And if you don't, and you actually mentioned this a few weeks ago, but for the sake of completion, if you have an iPad with a Lightning port, what I recommend is the Apple Lightning to USB 3 camera adapter. Now, they have another one called Lightning to USB camera adapter, which is $10 cheaper. Don't get the $29 one, get the $39 one, because it allows you to hook up USB devices. And so you can, and this will hang off the edge. It's not quite as elegant as the Hyperdrive product, but you can, of course you can use it for a camera if you wanted to, but you could also connect like a USB drive into there to pull some files. And this is something that when this first became available for the iPad many, many years ago, it wasn't as useful. But nowadays, now that we have the Files app on the iPad, and it's so much easier to work with files that are both on the iPad and on an external device, it's nice to have this in your bag. In fact, this device that you're showing right now, I actually still carry one of these around with me in my bag, even though I don't have a Lightning iPad and have not for years, because sometimes I'll be like at a conference or I'll be, at a meeting with another attorney and they're trying to get something off the iPad and we don't have Wi-Fi. I'll just, and they have an iPad with Lightning. I'll just hand this to them and say, just use this. Put it on a thumb drive and give it to me, and it'll be just like the old days. Sometimes a thumb drive is the fastest way to transfer something. So these are both useful. But whatever model iPad you have, these are great little dongles to have in your briefcase, purse, wherever.
I feel like all of us have that little tiny bag, you know, of the different adapters and dongles and this is absolutely one that has to be in there. And it's so wonderful. This was originally developed for the camera, just like you said, for professional photographers to get pictures from their camera over to their iPad so they can edit them. But now that Apple allows both the iPhone and the iPad to access thumb drives, this thing works beautifully. In fact, I'm actually updating my iPractice on an iPad course, and I'm focusing on this or making sure that people understand how to use this, because it is such a great thing to have in their bag. Don't leave home without it, kind of a thing. But I also love this hyperdrive thing as well. I'm so glad you found that it worked, and you already had it. It's like hyperdrive was ahead of their time, right? They knew that you were.
Yeah. How fun to have something that you already own and don't have to pay for again is exactly what you want.
It's a good feeling. I love that. I love that. All right. Jeff, thanks again. Always fun to talk with you for In the News, and we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.